For whom is power? The controversy over martial law and the ruling party's obsession. Respected listeners, today we will address one of the most controversial topics in contemporary Korean politics. It is time for a deep reflection on the nature of power and its exercise. In the political landscape of South Korea in 2025, the actions of former President Yoon Suk-yeol and the People's Power Party raise profound questions about the foundations of democracy in our society, beyond mere political debate. In this audiobook, we aim to explore the nature and legitimacy of power from an academic yet critical perspective, focusing on the so-called martial law controversy and the ruling party's response. Our goal is not simply to enumerate political events, but to provide an in-depth analysis of the underlying mechanisms of power and political accountability. Chapter 1. The Reality and Meaning of the Martial Law Review. In a 21st century democracy, the invocation of state emergency powers such as martial law or states of emergency must be approached with extreme caution. The controversy surrounding what has been colloquially termed martial law raises fundamental questions about constitutional values and the limits of state power beyond a mere political happening. According to facts revealed during the 2024 parliamentary audit, there appears to be evidence that martial law scenarios were discussed among certain military command lines and high-ranking administration officials. While the presidential office explained this as a simple crisis management simulation, the specificity of the internal documents and their timing caused many experts to express concern. Here, we must ask a fundamental question. What is state emergency power in a democratic system? Is it simply a necessary measure during national crises, or a means to maintain power for specific groups? Historically, the abuse of state emergency powers has often been the first step in transforming democratic systems into authoritarian regimes. From Hitler's seizure of power in the Weimar Republic to the Marcos regime in the Philippines, and even to our own Yusin system, emergency measures were all enacted under the pretext of national crisis, eventually becoming the foundation for long-term dictatorships. What's particularly ironic is that such emergency measures are often implemented under the banner of protecting democracy. This creates the paradoxical logic of suspending democracy in order to protect it. Indeed, the greatest threats to democracy often come not from external sources, but from within, especially when acting under the pretext of protecting democracy. The current government's martial law review controversy can be viewed in this context. While the documents may have used terms like crisis management, the specificity of the content and its timing make it difficult to see it as a simple operational simulation. It appears like an attempt to maintain the form of democracy while undermining its essence. This situation reminds us once again of the classical questions about the nature of political power raised by Enlightenment thinkers like Rousseau, Locke, and Montesquieu. What is the core of their social contract theory? That power comes from the people and should ultimately be exercised for the benefit of the people. If power is exercised for self-preservation or the benefit of specific groups, it already means the breach of the social contract. Chapter 2. The political actions of the People's Power Party and the mechanisms of power maintenance. Political parties are core institutions of democracy, serving to reflect the diverse voices of the people in the political process. However, the recent actions of the People's Power Party seem focused more on protecting the current regime than on this essential function of a political party. After the martial law review controversy erupted, the People's Power Party immediately switched to a defensive stance. However, this defense focused on attacking the media, criticizing the opposition, refusing parliamentary investigations, and strengthening defensive and offensive frames, rather than presenting policy alternatives or future visions. Here we need to ask a fundamental question about the essence of party politics. For whom do political parties exist? Are they for the people or for the small group that holds power? Constitutional scholar Carl Schmitt defined the essence of politics as the distinction between friend and foe in his book, The Concept of the Political. From this perspective, the actions of the People's Power Party give the impression of treating the people as foes rather than friends. If a party considers the people as enemies in order to protect power, this violates the fundamental principles of democracy. Particularly noteworthy is the ruling party's consistent frame war strategy. Rather than discussing the substance of the martial law review, they tend to blur the issue by questioning the motives or political intentions of those who raised it. While this strategy may be effective in avoiding political crisis in the short term, it can seriously damage public trust in politics over the long term. This situation is reminiscent of newspeak and doublethink, as described in George Orwell's novel 1984. Those in power try to control public perception by manipulating language and distorting facts. Like the novel's slogans, "War is peace," "Freedom is slavery," and "Ignorance is strength," we are seeing the ironic situation in real politics where the essence of democracy is being damaged in the name of protecting democracy. Such behavior by the ruling party can be seen as part of a structural mechanism for maintaining power, beyond simple political tactics. French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu explained through the concept of symbolic violence how power is exercised through symbols and discourse rather than physical coercion. The ruling party's frame war is precisely a form of such symbolic violence, serving to naturalize and legitimize power relations. Chapter 3: The Essence of Democracy and the Legitimacy of Power. The crisis of democracy often comes not from extreme chaos or disorder, but from gradual erosion and public apathy. German political scientist Hannah Arendt, in analyzing the origins of totalitarianism, explained how public political indifference and cynicism become the foundation for authoritarian regimes. The judgment of whether the current government and ruling party's actions align with constitutional values and democratic principles must ultimately be left to history and the people. However, what is clear is that when those in power do not fear the people, democracy is in danger. Thomas Jefferson said, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." This is not, of course, advocating physical violence, but a metaphorical expression that democracy requires constant vigilance and participation by the people to endure. The current actions of the ruling party are difficult to shield from criticism that they are obsessed with maintaining the regime itself. Politics should be a means for the people, not a shield for specific individuals or factions. Power is not an end in itself, but merely a tool for the public good. In this situation, we must ask a fundamental question about the legitimacy of power. For whom does power exist? If the answer is the regime itself, rather than the people, then that power may already be another form of dictatorship borrowing the name of democracy. The essence of democracy is not simply majority rule or regular elections. It is based on checks and balances on power and the fundamental principle that power ultimately serves the people. When these principles are undermined, democracy becomes an empty shell with only form remaining. Chapter 4: Historical Lessons and the Tasks of Modern Korean Politics. History has shown countless times what results from the abuse of power and the consequent regression of democracy. From the fall of the ancient Roman Republic to numerous authoritarian regimes of the 20th century, the concentration of power and weakening of check systems have often led to the end of democracy. Modern Korean history also contains these lessons. The April 19th Revolution, the May 18th democratization movement, the June Uprising. All these democratic movements were people's resistance against the abuse of power. The value of democracy achieved through such historical struggles should never be taken lightly. The actions of the current government and ruling party give the impression of having forgotten these historical lessons. Weakening mechanisms that check power and dismissing the voice of the people as political noise violates the fundamental principles of democracy. What is particularly concerning is that this behavior seems to be becoming a consistent governing style rather than a one-time mistake. This suggests the possibility of a new form of authoritarianism operating within the institutional framework of democracy. That is, elected dictatorship. Political scientist Fareed Zakaria, in his book The Future of Illiberal Democracy, defined illiberal democracy as a regime where formal democracy is maintained, but substantive freedoms and rights are restricted. In such systems, elections are held regularly, but power becomes increasingly concentrated and check systems weakened. We need to seriously consider whether the actions of the current government and ruling party are heading towards such illiberal democracy. Maintaining democratic institutions formally while actually concentrating power and suppressing critical voices violates the essence of democracy. Chapter 5. The Nature of Power and the Future of Democracy. Reflection on the nature of power has long been a subject of political philosophy. Plato, in his dialogue The Republic, presented the philosopher king as the ideal ruler. The philosopher king is one with wisdom and virtue, exercising power for the good of the entire community rather than personal interest. However, it is difficult to expect such ideal rulers in real politics. Power inherently tends to corrupt, and institutional mechanisms are needed to check this. Montesquieu's principle of separation of powers can be understood in this context. In modern democratic states, the legitimacy of power derives from the consent and support of the people. The further power distances itself from the people, the weaker its legitimacy becomes. The current government and ruling party's actions give the impression of focusing more on maintaining power than communicating with the people. This can lead to a loss of political trust in the long term. The future of democracy ultimately depends on how power is exercised and for what purpose. When power is exercised for the people, democracy is strengthened. Conversely, when power is exercised for self-preservation or the benefit of specific groups, democracy is endangered. We now stand at a critical crossroads for democracy. Efforts to realize substantive democracy beyond formal democracy are needed more than ever. This is not just the responsibility of those in power, but a responsibility that all citizens must share. Chapter 6. Reflection and Outlook. The nature of power from a biblical perspective. Viewing all these discussions from a biblical perspective, we can gain important insights into the nature and purpose of power. The Bible teaches that power comes from God and should ultimately be used for the good of the community. Romans 13:1-4 says, "There is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God." And later states, "For he is God's servant for your good." This clearly states that the purpose of power is for the good of the community, not personal benefit. Also, in Matthew 20:25-28, Jesus taught, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave." This emphasizes that the essence of power lies in serving rather than ruling. This biblical perspective has important implications for modern politics. When power becomes a tool of service for the people, it aligns with its original purpose. Conversely, when power becomes a means for self-preservation or the benefit of specific groups, it deviates from its essence. Proverbs 29:2 says, "When the righteous increase, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people groan." This suggests that the way power is exercised is directly related to the happiness of the entire society. Isaiah 10:1-2 warns, "Woe to those who decree iniquitous decrees, and the writers who keep writing oppression, to turn aside the needy from justice and to rob the poor of my people of their right." This emphasizes that power should be exercised according to the principles of justice and fairness. In the context of modern Korean politics, these biblical teachings demand fundamental reflection on the nature and purpose of power. Power comes from God and should ultimately be exercised for the benefit of all people. When it deviates from these principles, power loses its legitimacy. Conclusion. Journey toward true democracy. We have attempted an in-depth analysis of the nature of power and how it is exercised, centered on the martial law controversy. Through this, we have confirmed that the essence of democracy lies not in simple formal procedures, but in the fundamental principle that power is exercised for the people. The actions of the current government and ruling party raise serious questions about whether they align with these fundamental principles of democracy. When power focuses more on self-preservation than communication with the people, it has already deviated from the essence of democracy. The Bible teaches us that the true purpose of power lies in serving. In Matthew 20:28, Jesus said, "The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." This teaching provides important insights for modern politics. True democracy is a system where the people are the masters of power. When power is exercised for the people, democracy is strengthened. Conversely, when power is exercised for self-preservation or the benefit of specific groups, democracy is endangered. We now stand at a critical crossroads for democracy. Efforts to realize substantive democracy, beyond formal democracy, are needed more than ever. This is not just the responsibility of those in power, but a responsibility that all citizens must share. Amos 5:24 in the Bible says, "Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." This is the political ideal we should pursue, and the essence of democracy. Our journey continues. Reflection on the nature of power and efforts to protect the values of democracy must continue without ceasing. That is precisely the attitude of responsible citizens that the Bible teaches us. Closing remarks. Respected listeners, thank you sincerely for listening to this lengthy audiobook to the end. Through an in-depth analysis of the nature of power and how it is exercised, we have pondered together the fundamental values of democracy and its sustainability. I hope these discussions have helped to awaken your political consciousness and sense of responsibility as citizens. Democracy is never a completed system, but a value that must be protected through constant participation and vigilance. I would like to continue communicating with you through such in-depth political and philosophical discussions in the future. If you want more content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your subscriptions, likes, and valuable opinions are a great source of strength for us. I look forward to meeting you again in the next audiobook. Thank you.